Okay, so hopefully you've got 3 maps now, one for soft structures, one for sectors and microclimates, and a third one for your water use. And you're going to need 3 more maps, 3 more copies for what we're going to look at today. And the first thing I'm going to invite you to look at is desire lines. So these are basically routes through the site that us humans in particular like to take, although animals also have desire lines, and you might see evidence of those around your space. But essentially they tend to be from access points like gateways or driveways into main doorways, into houses or buildings that you might frequent on a regular basis. So to make a note of these things, so here we have a front path, which is a classic desire line. It's a straight line, and interestingly there is a second desire line here which is not obvious at all because it only exists when we move house. So when we moved in, because a lot of things we wanted to take to that side of the house, we actually ended up cutting across the lawn and going in a sliding door there, but it's the only time we've ever done that. Of course, if we move house out, we would do the same because this is where the vehicles get to. So look out for desire lines. Some of them might be occasional, some of them might be very regular. There is another one which is over here. If we come outside the front door and we want to go up there to the well house and beyond, then we want to go up that slope. And until last year there was no steps on that slope, so we would often be sliding up and down in the winter, muddy. At one point I injured myself a little bit coming down and sliding and walking, crashing into the window. So look out for desire lines. So where do you move around on your site? Where do you spend time going backwards and forwards? And this will be useful later because what we're going to be doing is thinking about where do we spend a lot of time, where do we notice things. So along this footpath here, you'll notice there's quite a lot of plants here which may not be obvious at this point because it's winter and there's no leaves on them. But this planting on this side is very deliberate because every time we come in and out of the house, to and from going for a walk or to a vehicle, we pass these plants and we give it a lot of attention. Now outside the back door, there's a similar thing, but here there's a couple of desire lines. We can go this way, which is over to through the gate and over to the holiday let, or up through there, which goes up to the vegetable garden. Now, this brings us on to another thing that's called zoning. In permaculture we talk about zoning, and zoning is very much, ultimately it's about putting things that need a lot of attention or that we want to give a lot of attention to. For instance, go to a vegetable garden to look after it, but also to maybe harvest vegetables from it. Put those things close by or as close as possible given your situation. And to begin with, what we're doing is we're observing how things are now. So are some of those things that you visit on a regular basis, are they close by or are they quite some distance away? Now, zoning is an interesting one because to stay fit and healthy, we need to move, and going for a walk is good. But sometimes, for instance, you might want to, we might, so this is the kitchen, we're in here and we need an onion, or we're going to get some potatoes. And we just pop out to the vegetable beds which are just here and we get what we need. Now on a wet and windy day, if they're further away, it might give us more of a walk, but we might be less inclined to go for that. So zoning is an interesting balance, so don't put everything so close that you never do anything on a sort of Wallace and Gromit thing where apples fall into a net and roll down a hill, down some guttering, come into cat flap and into a fruit bowl, and you just go which is all very clever, and of course epitomises what human society is about, because there is all that food growing out there and it's working its way to us, and we're just swiping a card and suddenly it arrives at our door in a van and someone brings it along and so here it is. It's almost the same thing, isn't it? But in terms of resilience and making things work for you, if you are going to be growing some food, grow it in a place where you're going to interact with it easily, you can keep an eye on it, and you're going to go and harvest it, whatever the weather. So zoning is very much about putting things in the right place, and it's good to start by thinking about how is everything zoned at the moment. So those things, do we have a compost bin that we take the compost out, but it's right at the end of the garden because it's this idea of keeping it away? and perhaps you don't do that. Maybe there's situations where people put compost out to the council because they never got around to taking it to their own compost heap. So we're looking at how is your site zoned at the moment. So in terms of design lines, how are you moving around the site? And that might vary depending on the people. So for instance, with our maps here, so this one here is design lines and this one is zoning, and they relate to each other very much. So where we go is the places that we give the most attention to. And as you can see here, there's pathways and so on in yellow. Well, let's move over here and then we can put it on the screen here. Then you'll see that some places further away are zone 1 because we walk there on a regular basis, like up to the garage or the conservatory or to where the cars are parked or around the courtyard. And some areas less so, they're more what we would call zone 2. So zone 1 is close by, zone 2 is a bit further away. Zone 3 and 4, if you have them, are even further out. That's more kind of a farming situation. Zone 5 are places that we don't go to, we just leave, or we go to observe nature, for instance, but we're essentially leaving nature to it. Zone 0 is inside where you live, your house or your caravan or wherever it is. And so I'm making a map of design lines, and you can see I've got different colours on here because different people have different design lines. So maybe different members of the same family, maybe if you've got kids, they go and play in a certain place, but you don't really go there unless you're supervising them. And there may be places you go to do stuff that the kids don't go to, and so on. So different people can have different design lines. If you have visitors, like we have a holiday let, so they park in a particular place and they walk in different places to us. So they have their own design lines. And when we're thinking about putting things into a design, we want to be thinking about where do the different people go and where do we need to put things to work well for them as well. So for now, just map out where you go, and on your map, if you've got different people doing different things, then use different colours. We have an interesting one for wheelbarrows, because if we want to bring things from the top down to the bottom in a wheelbarrow, we can't come down the steps because that's precipitous. We have to go the long way round, which is all the way around here on our map. So make a map of your design lines, make a separate map of your zones, but bear in mind that they will relate to each other. And the last thing I want to have you look at, because this is all about energy use, how we expend energy on the site. I'm also going to invite you to think about the other forms of energy that you use, that you bring on to your site from elsewhere, things like gas, electricity, even water, and so on. So here we're not on the mains gas network, so there's a large tank. The gas is used primarily for heating and hot water on the site, and we've inherited that. And of course that's something that moving forward we need to be thinking about collectively. How do we do that? But in the meantime, there's a big gas tank here. Also what you can see here just behind is the well house, which is how people used to get their water here. Now it's one of the things that drew us to coming to live here is the well. Now it's generally not got any water in it, and we'd like to do something about bringing that online at some point, but at the moment this is a non-functional well in a rebuilt well house. The main water comes in just here and it goes on to our neighbours over here, and there's a T and a meter and it runs down to the house. So we know where that is, but for many of us these things are invisible. You know, they're buried in the ground. Where are the pipes, where are the cables? Very often we don't know where they go. We've got drainage pipes off the main house for the gutters, rainwater runs down the pipe, just goes into the ground. We have no idea where it goes. So you may not be able to answer all the questions. You may not be able to map all of these things. And on our utilities map, again, we'll put it up in large so you can see it properly. You can see some of these things are approximate. We're assuming that some of these underground pipes and cables take a straight line, follow a straight line between places. When we put the terracing in, we knew that there was an electricity cable, a big chunky one that went from the main box on the side of the house across to the garage. We assumed it took a straight line, but we had to very carefully excavate, because when they were digging with the digger, we didn't want them to chop that cable in half. So it's very useful to know these things and to keep a record, and very often people don't. This is the frustrating thing. When you move into a house, we should all get a manual that says where the cables go, all the hidden stuff. You know, we hide it away because we don't want to look at it, but then it's really easy to accidentally chop into cables and pipes, and sometimes that can be a dangerous thing to do. So have a look at where the utilities come into your house and just map those as well, because even if it's, you know, you find out where it is and you remember where things are, but if somebody else moves in at some point in the future, they're going to benefit from this map. And of course, this is also going to be useful for us later. If we start making decisions about doing things, we might want to plug into those utility networks, or we might want to avoid just digging them up, because here we have about a foot of soil on bedrock, so we know that wherever anything like a pipe or a cable is buried, it's not very far below the ground. So there's your task for the next week. Just have a look around, think about the desire lines. Where do you move around your site? Make a map of that. Think about zoning. Where are your zone ones? Where do you spend a lot of time? Where do you not spend quite so much time? It's a zone 2, or you might call it a zone 1.2. The numbering doesn't really matter. It's just to give you a sense of where do you go a lot and where do you not spend quite so much time, and where are the places you just don't go at all. Because sometimes they can be right next to your house, but they're just not on a desire line. They're sort of in a corner, and that could be a place that you could do things which is nearby, but because you don't go that way at the moment, then those places just, they might end up just becoming a dumping ground for stuff. So map your desire lines, your zones, and get your utilities on your third map, and I'll see you back here next week to look at the last things. And yeah, when you're looking at your energy use, reflect on how vulnerable you are. You know, if the power did go off, what happens? What will work, what won't work? Gas may seem like an alternative to electricity, but if the electricity goes off, then the gas boiler can't work because it needs electricity to run the gas boiler. That makes sense. So yes, anyway, enjoy, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.